find it?
Sorry about that.
Okay. When you're ready. Start. Are you recording? Okay. Okay, we'll get started. It's 7:11 in the evening. My name is Steve Bachmiller. I'm the Hagerstown City Zoning Administrator. Since our chairman has resigned and is no longer with the board, the rules say that the staff will open the hearing and conduct an election for acting chairperson. For those who may not be aware, our chairman, Brian Kratika, accepted a position with the law firm that serves as the city attorney, the law firm of Salvatore and Morton. And as a result, he can't be on the board and also work for the city at the same time. So he has resigned. He will be staff or legal counsel to our office. So you may still see him from time to time, but in a different role. With that, we'll open up nominations for an acting chairman for the meeting.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Stauffer as the acting chair.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have Greg Deck motion, Laura Lowry seconded. Are there any other nominations from the floor? With that, we'll close nominations. Those in favor of Mr. Stauffer acting as acting chairman for the purposes of this meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed in like manner. Let the record reflect it was a 5-0 vote. Mr. Stauffer is the chairman. Mr. Chairman, we are operating under the extended COVID rules of procedure that you all voted at your last meeting to extend until August 30th. So there's no need for a motion today to extend any rules of procedure. You're operating under the motion from the previous meeting. Also, we have received a request to postpone the hearing tonight for Z 2021-09. This is for Wells House. This is an administrative appeal of a decision that I rendered regarding a property that they own. They have requested a postponement to further prepare the case. So we'll need a motion to postpone that meeting until September 22nd.
I will make that motion that the Wells House meeting be postponed until September 22nd.
Okay, Greg is motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Laura Lowry is seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed in like manner. 5-0 vote. Okay. With that, that's correct. Yes. Okay. With that, Mr. Chairman, you have your one case for the evening.
So we start with introductions. So I'm Jim Stauffer. I am the acting chairperson. To my right is Greg Deck, who is a board member. To my left, Laura Lowry, board member. And joining us remotely is Aaron Smith and Janice Kelch. Also with us is Steve Bachmiller, who is the zoning administrator, and Amy Hott, who is the secretary for the go through the function of the board. The decisions in this case heard tonight are based on general and specific criteria as enumerated in the Land Management Code. This is an administrative proceeding. As such, it will be conducted just as if it were a court of law, except we will not follow as strictly the rules of evidence. Everyone who wishes to be heard on the particular case will be heard. Each of the cases will be heard in the order filed with the board. Procedure that we have, that we will first hear the applicant, then all witnesses for, then all witnesses in opposition. Then, if necessary, any final remarks from the applicant. We will then take the case under advisement and give a decision within 45 days. You're welcome to stay after the hearing and listen to the deliberations, but discussion is limited just to the board members. Within 30 days of the date of the written decision and order provided by the board, you have the right to appeal. Any party who participated in the hearing and is aggrieved by the decision may appeal to the circuit court. This is the 30 days after the date of the decision and order opinion, not the date of the hearing. And I should clarify, is that over the 45 days, it means that you will get a written decision within 45 days. You can't act until you've gotten that written decision from us, so we can't act based on the decision we'll make tonight.
Mr. Chairman, actually, if it's an approval and there's no opposition, we'll sign off on building permits that they can move at their risk. Because there's still the possibility that there might be an appeal, most likely won't happen, but we won't stand in the way of issuing a permit, but they'll need to understand that it's at their risk.
Thank you. We have two rules, which all participants will follow. Only remarks that we will consider are those given from the witness chair under oath, and we ask you to confine the remarks just to things pertinent to the case. At this point, I guess we want to read in the case. So case number Z2021-10, which is to hear an application made by Stephen Keen, is that correct? Skeen, for variance reduce required 25-foot front setback from Prospect Avenue to 18 feet, installation of an above ground swimming pool at the property known as 801 Hamilton Boulevard, located in the R-Mod zoning district and in the Oak Hill Historic District. So with that, Mr. Buckner, could you read in the details?
Certainly. This is case Z 2021-10. The applicant is Stephen Skeen. Property is located in the R-Mod Residential Moderate Density Zoning District, and it is also located in the Oak Hill Historic District. Site location is 801 Hamilton Boulevard. This is a corner lot with the corner of the side street is Prospect Avenue. The request is for a variance to reduce 25-foot front yard setback from a side street, in this case Prospect Avenue, to 18 feet for the construction of an above-ground pool and deck. This application is being made for the reason that under Article 4, Section K1B, the minimum permitted setback for buildings and structures from a street right-of-way in the R-Mod district is 25 feet. The deadline for a written decision is October 2. However, I fully expect to get the written decision out much earlier than that. The staff report is, this is a request for a variance. There are 6 criteria in the ordinance for which the applicant will need to demonstrate that they meet. Staff will point out that the pool is already under construction. However, that fact is that it's under construction cannot be used as a unique condition or a self-created hardship either. Basically, treat the hearing as if the pool was not there. Are there unique characteristics associated with the property, regardless whether they had started it or not? Conditions of approval: should the board approve the variance, in addition to the standard condition that the work be completed in accordance with the application and testimony provided, staff recommends a condition that the variance be valid only if a certificate of appropriateness is obtained from the Historic District Commission. While the applicant would have to do so anyway, such condition makes it clear that this variance process does not in any way circumvent or supersede the HDC's authority to review and approve improvements in the historic district. The HDC will ultimately see, if it's approved, will see a request for a certificate of appropriateness through their process. So they did not comment. We did not receive comments from other agencies. Mr. Ski, do you have a copy of the staff report? Did we get that to you? Yeah, kind of looks like this. Okay. I get a copy for you. And those go right up there to this chair.
Okay, so can I have the applicant come to the table and stand for a minute, please? Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly promise to declare under the penalties of perjury the testimony you are about to give this board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Nancy. So please state your name for us and your address.
Name is Stephen Jack Skeen, address 801 Hamilton Boulevard, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.
And you are the property owner.
Correct.
So could you walk us through what you're looking to do while you're requesting the variance?
I'm trying to, at first I called the city of Hagerstown to make sure it was allowed to put an above ground pool in historic areas, society, the Oak Hill Historic District, and they informed me that it was with permits. So my yard is shaped extremely awkward. On the corner of Prospect Avenue going up, it kind of goes to a, how to say, like a V. The best position I could find to locate a pool was what I've shown to you folks in a drawing. Unfortunately, the variance I was told was not enough to clear the city ordinance. So I'm asking for a 6-foot 6-inch variance. Trying to put a 21-foot round pool. And my original design was a much larger deck. I have shrunken that down to a 14-foot deck in the back with a walkway around the front with a privacy fence. Instead of going out with our original design of 14 feet, I've shrunk it down to 7 feet. And what my intentions are to hide it back in the corner of my lot, which is covered by trees and shrubbery. So it's not accessible or viewable by the public going up Prospect Avenue.
But it's where the pool currently sits right now, correct?
Correct.
So the pool's already been constructed.
Well, I tell you what, I put the shell up because I had to see the lights come out to measure the distance from the pool to the power line to make sure I was in code. The code was 22 feet 6 inches. I was 25 feet 6.5 inches. So I was clear on that from the power line to the pool. So the shell is up. The nothing else is, the line's not in it, the pool's inoperable.
And there's no other place on the property where the pool could fit, still meet the code requirements?
No, absolutely not. Because the other side of the pool, the other side of my yard is split by a brick sidewalk. I have a parking pad on the rear corner, which I'm trying to put the pool adjacent to. The other side's got power lines, cable lines, neighbors. So the only place I could possibly put it would be in this corner of the yard.
And the layout of the property and the yard itself is all the way it was when you purchased the property.
Correct.
And you purchased the property recently?
Yes. I have not changed any of the land.
Are there other properties in your neighborhood that have an above ground pool already? You're aware of?
I don't know. I have to check. All I know is I called the city before I even started this project. Was I allowed to do it? And they said, absolutely. For permit, you can do it.
And the variance is from the edge of the pool to the edge of the yard, not from the edge of the deck, is that correct?
No, it's from the edge of the deck.
It is from the edge of the deck.
Correct. It's not really a deck, it's kind of a walkway with a privacy fence. So people on Prospect Avenue can't really see or interfere with what's going on the pool. They can't get into it. They can't. It's like a second. I have a picket fence along Prospect Avenue I just installed. I'm going to put a secondary privacy fence around the pool, so make sure people don't get bothered by the pool.
And if you didn't build deck where you're looking at doing it, what's the distance then from the edge of the property?
21 feet 6 inches. So I'm looking for a 5-foot walkway between the pool and at the edge of the walkway. Here's another question. I can't go back any further. And the reason being is I have a parking pad that was there when I bought the property.
Okay.
And between the parking pad and the edge of the pool, the shelter pool sitting there now is 6 feet. You can estimate it's 5 feet, 6.5 inches, but I say 6 feet, and I've got shrubbery there. And I have to put a foundation for a pump, a filter, and a heater. So that kind of limits my going back any further. I don't want to put the pump and the heater on the side of Prospect Avenue. Because I have to run a 220 line, I gotta get a permit for that. I don't want to go. I need the pool and the house.
Steve, could I ask for some clarification? I'm reading the request and it references a front yard.
This
That-
is a
When you say
side
Steve,
yard,
you're
actually.
referring to
This is
that
a
Steve or this
backyard.
Steve?
This Steve, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Just wanted to check.
References a front yard
No,
setback.
this is not a front, this is a backyard. I noticed that also.
Well, let me provide some explanation. That the way the zoning laws are written, any public street is a front yard, regardless of how the house is oriented. So
Oh,
this property
okay.
has 2 front yards as far as the language of the zoning law goes.
And I agree as written, it states, but yet the application as written references nothing but a rear yard.
And we realize that when applicants apply, a lot of times folks only deal with the board of zoning appeals one time in their life. They'll probably never see you again. And as a result, they do the best job that they can
All right.
in writing the application. If we see discrepancies, we correct it in the staff report, which I did. So, but this is a front yard, even though it's not the front of the house. It's a public street right of way, therefore it is a front yard. And as a result, it's subject to a 25-foot front
25
setback.
foot.
Along the same lines, there's a couple comments, say 35-foot variance. Two, you're talking about 25-foot variance.
That's rear yard is written there in the application.
Okay, it's 25 feet.
25.
Yeah, I was told 35, but that's why I do a diagram around here.
35 is the distance of the principal structure has to be from the back alley.
Right. And I think in section C on page 3, it says 35, because interpretation is being a rear yard versus a front yard. So,
The drawing that he provided is actually pretty good.
Mhm.
With the curved prospect and the distance to the street right of way and all. Did a good job putting that together.
any other questions, Rick?
No, I mean, I was just confused because of the rear yard here and the front yard there. So that's taken care of. Thank you.
All right, any questions?
Yeah. Not at this time.
Janice or Aaron, any questions?
Not at this time.
No, sir.
I don't have any questions either. So I guess we can put stuff aside for a moment. Is there anybody else that wants to testify on behalf? Yes, 4. Anybody else wants to testify for the variance?
That's my wife. We're just trying to provide some place for our grandkids and our kids to enjoy it. You know, I can tell you this, I put a picket fence up. I don't know if you have pictures of it, but I went all the way from the front for code. And it's all the way down Prospect Avenue. It's got copper caps on it. It's got night lights on it. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I'm
It's
not
very
gonna
nice.
build. I'm not gonna build any junk, believe me. I'm not gonna trash my neighborhood. I can promise you that.
Appreciate that.
Yes, it is a very nice looking fence.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I've known that house for years, so yes.
I appreciate that. I did a lot of hard work on that.
Okay, so if nothing else, you can step back and we'll move on. Is there anybody else for? If there's anybody against, wants to testify? Okay. Then I think At this point, we can close and start deliberations.
I don't believe anybody has shown up or signed up on Zoom to testify, so we're good there.
Then at that point, let's close the testimony and we can move into deliberations. So let's go through the, and you're welcome to stay if you want or leave. Let's go through the criteria. So unique condition of the property. Obviously, the way the property is laid out is rather unique. If you were driven by and have seen it, let alone the picture.
Mhm.
It's very oddly shaped based on the prospect kind of curves around it. Is this the shape of where the house is positioned versus what we would typically consider front yard versus interpret as a back or side yard? I can see the confusion. But I would say unique conditions of the property exist. Anybody
I
disagree?
would agree that it is unique.
Yes, I concur. I agree as well.
So minimum necessary for the relief, based on the design, based on what's trying to be done, based on a pool being a fairly common use for most residential areas. Pools are not uncommon. Based on the design of the house and property itself, I think the demonstrated that that's the minimum that can be done to put the house in put the pool in a reasonable location, provides use for them, but also it's not be a challenge with other things on property. So minimum necessary, it's like he has put together the minimum necessary to request to get a pool put in place.
I would agree. I would think that the only other alternative would be to cut down some large trees.
And I'm sure they've been there for quite some time.
Janice or Aaron, any feedback?
No, I agree.
I agree as well.
Compliance would preclude common use. I think that, again, if you interpret that a pool is a common use at a residential location in many neighborhoods, complying with the conditions here for the size and type of structure will be done. So the way the property is laid out, based on requirements we look at, I think declining the variance would preclude a common use that many of the people enjoy within the area, in the city for sure, within the neighborhood property. Other comments or disagree with that?
No comment.
No.
I would agree.
No comment.
So before, no special privilege. Are we granting a special privilege that is denied by the ordinance to other lands or structures within the same zoning? I am aware of other properties in that neighborhood that do have above ground pools within general vicinity, not necessarily the same exact block. So if there's no special privilege, then we would not be granting a variance for anything that wouldn't be considered for anything else. It's something that always come to the board if there was a question. To consider.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that you might want to think about, we write this into your staff report or into your decisions on a regular basis, is if you find that there's a unique condition that kind of takes care of, in a way, special privilege, because you're finding the uniqueness of the property, therefore you're not giving them anything they're really not entitled to.
So self-created hardship then, obviously I don't think self-created hardship properties existed in the condition, in the layout. It's there now for many years. Obviously, a lot of work's been done on the house in the recent time frame to improve the look of the exterior, but that doesn't fundamentally change the property layout, the structures on the property. I don't think it's a self-created hardship based on the design that you purchased.
Right.
Feedback or comments on that?
I would agree with you.
And final one, consistent with intent of the ordinance. I would say that the request does seem to be consistent with the intent, which is to keep the properties, keep the neighborhood safe, keep the properties looking well, making sure that we're not creating conditions that cause challenges with use of the property, with use of the streets around the property. Based on the conditions that are laid out in the land management code, I would say that it seems like consistent use of the property to have a pool that is safely away from the street. and it is hidden based on the structures he's planning on putting in place. I don't know that there's anything that's going to damage the neighborhood. I don't see anything that would be out of the ordinary with a full being in a property like this. Again, common use probably in the neighborhood, and I don't think the intent of the ordinance is to deny somebody something that's common use when there is a reasonable variance that could be accommodated.
No, I assume Prospect is considered a main artery.
I think it's probably a minor collector.
Prospect is a man.
Minor collector.
Well, I think in that case, it gives us a little leeway there.
So I think other than, anybody has any other comments, I think we kind of said, yes, we would say that all of these conditions have been met. Disagree that any of the conditions have been met?
Staff would suggest just adding a couple things to the justifications. Unique condition of the property, you might want to also mention in there that it's also part of the historic district. And it helps preserve the character of the district to locate people in such a way where they don't have to take trees down, that kind of thing. And that's all I have.
Janice or Aaron, any comments, any disagreement that we've met the 6 conditions?
In agreement, no additional comments.
Same with me, in agreement, no comments.
So I would say that it sounds like we should vote on whether we approve or not with the, whoever makes the motions to make sure they take into account a comment about the layout of the property. The historic district needs to weigh in on it. And that although we may grant yes to the variance, the historic district still needs to give a certificate of appropriateness, and that's really the determining factor on this. And probably should be comment made about property being on a minor collector road, unique layout of the property, and the fact that to put it anyplace else would cause damage to the property, including older structures and or trees on the property. So does somebody want to make a motion that covers those topics?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion that we grant the variance based on. Do I have to say all of it? Based
Just
on,
say
the-
compliance with the 6 criteria.
based on the uniqueness, based on compliance of the 6 criteria that you just mentioned. Do I hear a second?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are you going to apply any conditions?
Addition of the historic district or-
Yeah, oh, well, as you discussed, the historic district, maintaining historic district presence, the uniqueness of the property,
So what we're looking for is conditions, not additional justification. Conditions, specific statements, you have to do this, you have to do that in order for this to be valid. Staff recommended that, well, there's one that you usually put in anyway, that people have to do what they say they are doing and consistent with the
consistent with the request.
request. And in this case, staff recommended a second condition, say that they have to obtain their certificate of appropriateness from the HDC.
So I propose that we grant the approval based on the condition of the request and
Based on getting a certificate from.
and getting the certificate from the historic district
And based on following through with the project as
as
designed.
described.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, so based on that revision, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
5-0 grant. Okay. Mr. Keen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write up the decision in order in the next few days. You still have to get to the HDC. The HDC deadline for the next meeting, which is next week, is like tomorrow morning. But listen, this is what we'll do. I'll keep the agenda open for you until Friday morning. If you can get something to me by Friday morning, we'll get you on the plane. All right.
Now, if I could follow the agenda, can I just do the same plan that I have now?
What you're going to need to do is basically just take pictures of the pool in the deck. And you were talking about wanting to also build some sort of fence. Get us some manufacturer's literature on that fence and a drawing showing where on the property. You can just mark up the drawing that you already had where that privacy fence is going to go. And we'll get it moving for you, and hopefully we can get it done and taken care of for you by next Thursday. All right. All righty. You're done. Yeah, that's fine. There's no application fee or anything like that for HDC, so just email it to me is fine. Thank you.
And so then with that, we do need to talk about other business, which is the proposed bylaw revisions.
Yeah, we have drafted some updates to the bylaws per the conversation that we had at the last meeting. What I'll do is I'll enter those into the record. It's a document that says draft August 2021, which you should have. We made the following recommended changes on page 1 under quorum. We add to constitute quorum, participation by members of the board shall be in person or via an online meeting platform where members attending by remote connection have both video and audio connection to the proceedings. That way, somebody who is participating, such as Aaron and Janice are participating today, they constitute quorum, even though they're not physically present in the room.
Right.
One thing that I think we need to be clear about is I think we discussed this, it's really difficult for a member to participate if they don't have a video connection. If exhibits get introduced that weren't distributed prior to the meeting, they have no way of seeing them. So they're at a disadvantage of other members. Therefore, in order for that to qualify for quorum, the members need to make sure that they can see what's going on here. That way, if we have an exhibit, we need to show them, we can walk over to the camera, hold it up in front of the camera, and they can see it, at least, even if they don't have a hard copy.
Absolutely.
So we have that. And then moving on to page 2. We have 2 separate issues here that we need to address. One is the broadcasting of meetings, which has become kind of a staple now by city policy. All of the boards are doing it. But also the Zoom platform. In theory, we may not need a Zoom platform from time to time. Perhaps Aaron and Janice are sitting here, the applicant was here, nobody zoomed in, wanting to participate remotely. In theory, you can still broadcast the meeting, but not necessarily have to have a Zoom meeting. So I wanted to make sure we called them out separately so they don't get lumped in together and create problems of overlapping. So we amended number 3 as follows. Meetings are public and may be broadcast, video recorded, and archived. In accordance with city policy and the availability of technology and necessary staff, Board of Zoning Appeals meetings may be broadcast live via the internet, may be video recorded, and the recordings may be made available in an online archive available to the public. However, nothing in law requires such broadcast recording or archival storage. Should the technology fail or staff is otherwise unable to broadcast, record, or archive the proceedings, failure to do so is not a violation of these rules of procedure, nor grounds for appeal of any decision by this board. There's nothing in the law that says we have to broadcast. So we don't want anything in your rules of procedure that would allow somebody to get hung up and give somebody grounds in a court of law saying, well, they were supposed to broadcast it and archive it, and it's not on the web, and therefore it's not good. So we put this language in here, but we put the caveat saying if for some reason it goofs up, it doesn't affect any of your proceedings. And then we move on to new section number 4, use of online meeting platforms. This is basically where we're codifying what we did temporarily for the Zoom, for the COVID issue. New section 4 reads as follows: use of online meeting platforms. An online meeting platform may be made available for participants in commission meetings. With sufficient notice to staff, commission members may participate via an online meeting platform at their discretion. For a member to be considered participant in a meeting as defined by this article, each member must have at a minimum an audio and video connection to the proceedings via the digital meeting platform. With the approval of the chair for cause, applicants, supporters, and opponents to applications may participate via the online meeting platform. However, applicants are advised that due to the potential for miscommunication inherent in online platform meetings, it is generally expected that the applicant shall appear in person and participate in the meeting in person, barring extenuating circumstances. Applicants shall have at a minimum a video and audio connection when participating via an online meeting platform. Supporters, opponents, and other interested parties must have at a minimum an audio connection. Sufficient notice shall be no later than the end of business 2 days prior to the hearing. For example, no later than the end of business Monday for a Wednesday evening hearing. Might want to talk about that, because if you put that in your rules of procedure and somebody gets jammed up at the last minute or something like that, you might create problems for yourselves. I put that in as a discussion point. You might want to think about whether or not it should stay in. But basically, this sets it up where you members of the board, you don't have to have a reason. If you want to zoom in from home, from your car, if you're caught traffic, whatever, we'll pull over to the side of the road. You all don't have to really give any sort of justification if you want to participate remotely. But it's written in such a way where the applicant is expected to be here unless there's something really out of the norm. The applicant is in Washington State. The applicant is at the sick relative's bedside, something like that, whatever. Some legitimate criteria, because the applicant, they really need to be here to interact with you because of the potential for miscommunication, communicating electronically. And then it sets a lower standard for just members of the public who want to come out, testify in favor or opposed to something. It sets them where all they have to do is be able to hear what's going on. And that is all we have on that. So with that, if you want to start discussing it, you have to make whatever adjustments that you want. And then at your next meeting, assuming everything is in order and to your satisfaction, we'll get you to take a vote at your next meeting to put them into effect.
Okay.
So I guess my only comment would be in section 4, that last statement. There would be conditions, like I almost had one tonight where I wasn't going to make it here. I was 5 minutes away from calling and saying I was going to make it on time. So the 2 business day notice, I could have remotely connected from where I was, 5 minutes notice and participate. But I would not have given 2 days notice. I would have known my issue. It seems a little bit restrictive, but at the same time, we should try to do what we can.
I think what we're going to find at the staff level is we're just going to have to set up every meeting with a Zoom login, just as a fail safe. So I was kind of writing in such a way where we would figure out whether we even need a Zoom from meeting to meeting, but the more I'm thinking about it, the more practical that is. We ought to just have a uniform policy of just setting up a Zoom meeting for every meeting. If they don't, nobody uses it, nobody uses it. Not like it costs us anything.
I'd be my own suggestion to be that last little section before it comes out, and it can be, as late as like at the start of before the start of the meeting. Hey, I'm not there, but I'm participating.
Put it as due to unforeseen circumstances or something like that.
I know for me personally,
It'd be nice to know, at least 2 days in advance, but
yeah, I know for me personally, I work in Washington, D.C., so my time, and I leave my office at between 5 and 5:30. So sometimes I could be home at 6:30ish, but sometimes I'm pushing like that 7:50 range
Absolutely.
to where it's going to be really tight for me to get to the 7 o'clock.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I know about working in Washington DC, so Zoom,
Yeah.
and I think Zoom should always be available. Be made it available as the option.
So do we want to strike out the piece about the latest, the notice no later than end of business 2 days ahead, but take everything else as is?
That's what I would recommend.
And I think it's your point about, unforeseen circumstances, but I don't know if we put something in about that, if we just strike that out completely.
Well, okay, well. So what would you say then? Right now it says sufficient notice shall be known.
I would just say that whole statement comes out,
Just take it out.
just take
Yeah.
that statement out,
Everything
Mhm.
is going.
Mhm.
and there's nothing.
At the top of section 4, second line down, we also have another reference to with sufficient notice to staff, which I'm not arguing for keeping, don't get me wrong, but if we take that last sentence out that specifically defines sufficient notice, then this term up here is completely vague. So I would recommend, if we're going to pull that last sentence out, we also take out with sufficient notice to staff and just start off commission members may.
Right, so the second line, the first 5 words come out,
Correct.
and the last sentence and the sentence in parentheses after that. Any other comments or suggestions further?
Staff has one additional thing. It's kind of a little off topic, but I want to make sure you're finished with that before we move on to that. I just want to make sure
So
we got one more thing to talk about before we're done.
Do we need to vote on accepting this then?
If you want to, you could vote on it tonight and put it into effect. That way we don't have to vote at the next meeting. It's up to you.
And I would be all for doing that, just so we know that it's standard. And are you guys okay with voting on it tonight?
Mhm.
Accepting it or not?
So are we removing the last 2 lines, the paragraph?
Last 2 lines of the 4th section on page 2, and in the beginning of that section 4, in the second line, it says with sufficient notice to staff. We're going to take out those 5 words. So it starts just with commission members may participate.
Okay.
So with those 2 revisions then, sorry, I want to make a motion to accept these and put these into practice. for the next meeting.
Before you do that, let's talk about the other issue.
Oh, is that, okay. I
It's
didn't know it was
it's related to the rules of procedure, but I don't see anything specifically in the ordinance or in the rules that discuss it. The issue has kind of come up from an administrative standpoint of the issue of writing of decisions. You have what could have had been tonight a very controversial and very legally complicated administrative appeal on your hands tonight.
Correct.
And what don't you have?
We have no
It-
lawyer.
You have no
attorney.
lawyer, exactly.
Attorney, right.
So we did some checking with the city attorney's office. And what they advised us is that there's nothing wrong with staff crafting a decision in order in an administrative appeal, as long as everybody understands that the staff member writing it has to write what you all decide. In other words, they're nothing more than a writer. They have no real editorial control over it. So if staff puts together a draft decision in order, and you say, change this, change that, there's no argument on our part. We change it. Because ultimately you have to sign it, and it has to be something that you all are comfortable with, reflects your deliberations and all. And that makes perfect sense. And frankly, that's the way staff would have liked to have seen it happen before. To give you a little bit of history, for those of you who haven't been on the board that long, for decades, the members of the board actually wrote the decisions in order.
We sure did.
And their quality, to be honest, kind of varied, depending on the writer, depending on the circumstances, depending on the case.
True.
We pretty much begged this body at the time, probably, I'm guessing about, what, 5 years ago now, Janice, maybe?
Absolutely.
Yeah, to
Or maybe
let
a little
staff
longer.
start writing the decisions and orders. There was some pushback from some of the members who were on the board at the time who are no longer here.
True.
And the compromise was that staff would write the ones for variances, special exceptions, non-conforming uses, but administrative appeals, we would not.
Mhm.
But we're getting legal guidance that it's not necessarily a problem, but in order to get control over most of the drafting, we were like, okay, if that's, we'll take 3/4 of the load kind of thing. But, and we wouldn't necessarily be having a problem if we had either a outside legal counsel to the board, which we don't have, or an attorney sitting on the board right now, which also we don't have. So the question is would you have any objection if staff started drafting, providing you your initial drafts of decisions and orders on administrative appeals?
Until such time as there's an attorney.
That could be one way of looking at it.
I'm gonna say, I don't know that that's the limitation then, right? I mean, this would be, what you're presenting is just do all of them and do them for the foreseeable future, whether there's an attorney here or not.
That's my suggestion, but Janice makes it a debatable point.
90% of them, anyway, it's just when you're involved in them or when staff is involved in it, that they can't do this. That's the difference, correct?
That has been the perception of this board. However, our legal counsel is telling us it's not necessarily a problem as long as we respond to whatever you tell us to write.
You're not making changes, you're not adjusting what's been stated, you're just making sure that the clarity and legally the wording is appropriate to communicate what we've talked about.
We're not spinning the decision. We're not tilting it, hoping it might get appealed or anything like that. No.
And there's not going to be multiple records. So the audio recording is also an online recording potentially. So there's multiple records and we're able to challenge that.
Correct.
I don't, I think the question would be, is anybody going to challenge that? I think there's some conflict, but I think the two different recordings would eliminate any potential conflict. You have a law. Not a problem with that.
Right.
I don't see any reason.
And before the chairman signs, they review them, and if any revisions needed to be made, if there was, an error.
Every member who
That's-
participates in the
Right.
hearing reviews them. before the
Yes, we
chairman
all
signs them.
review.
You
them,
all see it.
exactly. Mhm, So,
And there's sort of been very little revision too.
Right.
The ones
Right.
I've seen for the last few years, I think there's occasionally a wording, like this word needs tweaked or something, but it's not,
any,
it's more communication versus like content. Like, don't versus, do and things like that. Very simple.
Making sure it's structurally sound, legally
Mhm.
sufficient. I mean, the testimony is going to be what it is, the discussion is going to be what it is, and the decision is going to be what it is.
Mhm.
So is there a section of this that needs to be revised for that as well?
I just looked and I don't see anything. There's nothing in the ordinance, in the bylaws that specifically say who writes the decision. So I think we're good, but I wanted to talk to you about it in the context of bylaws before we moved on. So what I'm hearing is that unless you in the future get mad at us and decide something otherwise, you're okay with staff writing those until further notice or until we have an attorney?
Until
We
we have an
got two
attorney.
perspectives that have been presented here. One is just general staff, go ahead and do it. And then one is okay in the short term as a temporary fix until an attorney's on board.
I would recommend that we do it for the foreseeable future, knowing that we could at any time come back and revise that. If we say that there's a lawyer now on, we feel more comfortable doing it, we could always go back and discuss again. So I don't know that we need to actually say until a lawyer is present. We have the ability to make that determination, make the change ourselves if we want to, correct?
Yeah.
So I think that would cover us.
Mhm.
Janice, how do you feel about it?
Until further notice or until we get an attorney. That's what's on the floor.
What's on the floor is two options. One is what you just described, or, well, yeah, those are the two things on the floor. Until further notice is basically open-ended,
Correct.
assuming there's not going to be an issue. Or the alternative is until there's an attorney appointed to the board.
And we can make the determination when the attorney is appointed, if there is one, that we can make a change then, or we make a change if there's a problem we feel comfortable with in the future. So we still have the ability to change it no matter what. I don't know that we need to clarify in our approval that it's only until the lawyer is available.
Until further notice.
Until further notice can be, well,
Long term.
Until further notice could be indefinitely if you never bring it up again, or it could be a month from now if you find that an attorney has been appointed to the board and you want that attorney to write your appeals decisions. It could be either one.
because that option would mean that the staff would be Which, actually, Steve, which has worked better for the attorney to write it? Just the administrative appeals, hasn't that been a better arrangement?
The way we've done it to this point has worked out. I could write decisions and orders for administrative appeals. I mean, I had to make sure I put my objectivity hat on, but
Mhm.
I could write them. I mean, it's probably a little bit better written by an attorney rather than by staff.
Right.
But
because
I've
of
been
the
also
language.
been doing it for 30 years and know what I'm doing too. So I mean,
But this,
kind of
this-
6 of one. I think it becomes 6 of one, half dozen of another, really.
well, this is true. This is true. So, well, until further notice would work for me then.
You can revisit it anytime that you
Okay.
want. So,
Mhm.
okay.
Aaron, what is your feeling?
Yeah, I mean, we have the availability to make the change at any time, so I don't think the verbiage is really that important.
Okay.
So we need to vote on this and include that as part of the vote?
I think we just handle that administratively. I don't think we need to write anything into the bylaws on it. There's nothing in there now. It's just we're making a tweak to our procedures. And you can go back and retweak them the other direction later if you don't like them. So
So does somebody want to make a motion to accept the change to the rules of procedure with the 2 revisions we discussed, being the removal of the last statements in section 4, the last 2 sentences, and the 5 words at the beginning of the second sentence at the top that says with sufficient notice to staff? Do you wish to approve that?
Yes, I will put forth a motion to approve the rules of procedure, the revisions as stated, with noting that we are omitting the last paragraph of section 4, and then also on the second sentence, omitting the 5 words that we had mentioned with sufficient notice to staff. So with those revisions, I approve the draft of the revisions for the rules of procedure.
So do we have a second?
I second.
So everybody in favor, vote aye.
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 And nobody's opposed, so 5-0. These are the rules.
okay. You can start using it at your next meeting.
So with that, if there's no other business, we're going to adjourn.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
You
all.
have a good night.
Good night.
You did fine, right?
And I said it very fast, but I can't make the motion myself.